The sun sets at almost midnight here in Norway now.
There it is! Check it out, guys! That is so exciting. Incredible.
Hello my friends, I'm Kyle Thompson. This is Research Flat Earth. And as always, welcome back.
I watched a video from my perspective. His video is called Flat Earth Sunbeams Part 1. I was outside and I go, man, let me try that. I just kind of ran in, I grabbed some cardboard, I cut some holes in it, and I wanted to see how the sun reacts coming through. So here I am, raising it high over my head, so I'm about 8 feet away from this, and the light doesn't diverge or spread out. You know, it doesn't splay out like we see the crepuscular rays. And this sun's far away. Just like in the heliocentric model, the sun is far away, right? 93 million miles away from our clouds. But we see the sun rays splaying out from the clouds as though it were a close sun and not a faraway sun. Well, you can see when it is far away, the light beams are parallel and they don't splay out or diverge from the clouds. So then I got a little bit more sophisticated. I went inside and I cut some nicer holes in another cardboard. You know, my budget went up. And here they are, and I put some CGI here. I put some beams in there, and you can see they are dead straight. No splaying out. And then you can also, there's a part here where I have it up overhead, and I had the same results. No splaying out. So this is the example of the faraway sun, that the rays, this is what we should experience coming through the clouds. The rays from a sun that's almost 1 million miles in diameter and 93 million miles away, when those rays get here, they should be parallel and dead straight. But we don't see them as dead straight. We see them splaying out or diverging from the clouds. Something's not right here.
Look at some ships sinking over the horizon effect through the lens of a container. This is a plastic container, by the way. Now look at this. As the horizon stays at eye level, the ships converge and they disappear behind the lens of the container. I do find this quite fascinating. I haven't seen any other videos on YouTube showing this effect. But we have to remember that although we're not looking through a jug of water as we look across the horizon, the horizon is absolutely full of water droplets. And that's only a couple of inches of a body of water in a container. You know, what happens over 5 miles? You know, how many water droplets are you looking through then? You know, what effect is that going to have? It's undoubtedly going to have some sort of effect where the water appears to swallow up the hull of the ship, when in fact that's not actually happening. It's just a combination of refraction, vanishing point, convergence, the limitation of human eyesight, and a trick of the light, a trick of perspective. And that's exactly what's happening here. I'm doing it on a much smaller scale with 2 ships here. You can see the smaller ship disappearing there, the larger ship, you know. You can see the masts. I'm going to take this a step further and I'm going to show you a little mock sun that I put together, which is just coming up now in this next clip. And look how the sun can set behind the lens of these water droplets, which would simulate the lens of the atmosphere. It even appears to be half a sun. It squashes, you know. The whole round Earth argument is like, well, half the sun has disappeared beyond the horizon, but I'm making a sun disappear on a flat plane here, and you're having the same effect. And when I move this jug away, you'll see that obviously I'm flat. You can see that I'm flat as I move it forward towards the jug there. And the horizon's moving to eye level as I move away. There's no tricks involved here. This isn't a joke. You can do this yourself at home. And in a moment I'm going to take away the flat plastic container and replace it with a glass container that's got a curve on. And we're going to see what sort of effect we get from that. This is undoubtedly showing that strange things happen with light before we take it a step further and do it across a lake, for example. There's more ships disappearing here. This is so fascinating. I've just had to put this together, and I want to show people that your brain can play tricks on you. I don't think ships disappear beyond a curve. I think it's a trick of the light. It's a trick of perspective. This shows that. This shows that clearly. Anybody can do it at home. Argue with this. Argue with this. I've shown you that stuff can disappear below a horizon that you've made at home in your kitchen. And yet these ball earthers are still going to tell me that ships are sinking over the horizon. Well, what do they know? What does anybody know? Look what's happening here. The sun's disappearing. On a flat plane, it's disappearing through the lens of the container, which is similar to the lens of the atmosphere. I'm repeating myself now, but this is fascinating stuff. I'm going to be moving my next experiment onto shadows, where we look at the way shadows behave on a flat plane and then compare that to how they behave on a ball earth. Because I've got a sneaky suspicion that if you're up against a wall and the sun's setting, the shadow of the surface should rise up, but we don't see that on a planet. We don't see that.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. It's alright. Darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Darling, the smiles return into their faces. Little darling, it seems like years since they've been there. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. It's alright. It's alright.
continue drawing the flat earth map with the triangulation method that I talked about a few months ago, if you remember, because I found out that I was triangulating a fake position of the sun. So triangulating the sun from 3 different positions is like triangulating 3 suns at the same time, and that will never ever give you a precise number. So that is why I stopped plotting the map, and right now I'm just focusing on how to locate the real position of the sun.
When the sun is directly overhead, the refraction is near 0, but you still can't say where the sun actually is. As the sun travels towards the west, the atmosphere creates an image of it for every eye. So anyone who looks at the sun from the same angle as you, but from a different city, will see the apparent sun in a different position. But no one can see the sun in its real position. So if you try to triangulate the sun, you will never get the exact distance. This is like trying to triangulate a rainbow.
Of the flat earth, the atmosphere is always missing. It's like drawing the flat earth in a vacuum of space. And this is why the sun never sits on the flat earth, because there is no refraction. Now my question is, have you ever seen an animation of the globe earth model with the effect of the atmosphere? I'm not talking about just drawing the clouds or the air. It's not just drawing them, it's how to make them work as they do in real life. You know what I mean? They know how the refraction works, and they know how the atmosphere works, but they never add it to their animation, you know? And if they do, the sun would never sit as they claim it does. And we can prove that too.
Modern science claims that the apparent sun sets after the real sun because of the atmosphere and the effect of refraction. So when we see the apparent sun above the horizon line, that is just a reflection of the real sun, which is already set. But when we added the atmosphere to the globe model, it did the same thing that it did on the flat earth model. The apparent sun goes down first, and the real sun follows it. That is contrary to the way refraction is normally presented.
So the atmosphere is something that we can't ignore. It's like looking at the sun with your glasses on. The atmosphere is like a lens with no cover. We are like fish in the sea, you know. So the atmosphere can change the whole view of the sun. Now, in order to prove this, we had to add the atmosphere to Steve's model, but the question was, how? It was not an easy thing to do, and by coincidence, Steve found out that his program is capable to model the atmosphere exactly how it is. So he took the data from the internet and built all the layers of the atmosphere, and suddenly the magic happened and everything started to make perfect sense. And when I say everything, I mean everything. The sun started to rise and set, and it started to match reality more than the globe model does.
The sun sets at almost midnight here in Norway now.
So this is the
midnight sun. It's almost 2 a.m. in the south of Norway. And the sun never sets. It's light all night like this. This is the darkest it gets. And the sun has been traveling from the left of your screen towards the right all day and all evening. And it will continue to do so all night. Now, I urge you to go on Google and search for the reason why there is a midnight sun. At my location, the sun is not visible right now. It's a little bit too far away. But further north in Norway, the sun, the whole sun is visible on the night sky. All night, all day, all night. Now, if you search for a reason, they say the reason is the tilt of the Earth, the axis. But if you think about it a little bit, that's not possible. It really just looks like the sun is going in a circle around me. The sun will continue to the right of your screen, and this is as dark as it gets. And in a few hours, about 4 or 5 a.m., the sun will rise, having never left. Of course, this is not possible in the heliocentric model.
At any rate, you're looking at a picture of one of the more famous physicists, Dr. Stephen Hawking. Now, many people, and I'm probably going to go along with it, many people think that Stephen Hawking is not alive or not anything that they claim whatsoever. You know what I'm saying? Because it doesn't make sense. The poor guy or puppet or whatever he is just crumpled up in a wheelchair, and he talks through an electronic box that could be anybody. So they could be literally using him like a sock puppet. You dig? At any rate, there's an article I wanted to show you guys from GeekWire.com. So check this out. For Hawking's 75th birthday, they sent some balloons into space. And I'm going to read the story to you real quick and play you this video. Famed British physicist Stephen Hawking has long wanted to go into space. So what better way to celebrate his birthday than sending him a greeting from near space? Nice. Nice. That is awesome. So here's the picture right there. There's the balloons. Happy birthday, Stephen Hawking. But do you notice anything odd about the entire picture? It sure doesn't look like what NASA tells us, correct? It looks like the sun is really, 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 really close. Well, guess what? It is. But that's not what I wanted to show you. Look at that picture. What do you see? Anything wacky about it? Well, hold on. Let's blow that up real quick. See that picture? Let's take a look in high definition. You notice anything odd about that picture from the sun? Do you see the dot right directly in the middle? Just like the one I was telling you about? Just like the one in the Freemasonic images of the two towers, Jachin and Boaz, with the black hole sun right there. Do you see that? Yeah, that's queer. No? Yeah? Well, hold on. It's going to get worse. Now, this was a picture somebody took and sent me way back in September, and it looks to be like a portal is opening directly in front of the sun, right? Okay, hold on. And here's video I took just the other day with a Nikon P900. Do you see this big white thing that's moving around in front of the sun? I know it's hard to keep the camera stable while it's zoomed out. I'm still working on getting a tripod, but do you see this large white item? That is some sort of a thing that floats around. I told you about this before, and since I put the video out back in before September, I got a ton of videos from all sorts of people. This white object in front of the sun moves around, but it never leaves. This white ball kind of bounces around in the front of this thing. So hold on. My theory is the portal is in the sun, or the sun is going to open up, or something to that effect. And that's why, while the Awake Project, while all the Hadron Colliders are running at the same time feverishly right now, the portal they're trying to open is going to open in front of the sun. And I think this picture from Hawking kind of backs it up a little bit. This was a video captured by another YouTube channel called the Zion Warrior, and I got his permission to use it. And you can clearly see this item in the middle. Now, a lot of people like to say that this was a built-in feature that cameras use to keep the lenses from being damaged. The only problem is I've debunked that using a Nikon P900, an Apple iPhone 5, 6, and 7, a Canon Rebel, blah, 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 so on and so forth. This video that he caught clearly has an item in the middle of the sun right there, and it's moving. Not only is it moving, but it reflects in the water. You know what I mean? This is absolutely crazy. And I think that they're showing this for a particular reason. I think they're talking to each other once again. Now, I could be totally wrong. I've been wrong many times before. I mean, I was married once, for crying out loud. You know, it happens. But I can't help but think that GeekWire, much like Space.com or any of the other big websites, wouldn't have noticed that right there in the middle of the sun. I mean, for crying out loud, they're framing the photo right there. And I noticed that there's barely any curvature back here, if any at all. Now, I'm not exactly a flat earther, but I'm starting to get a lot of information that's pointing directly in that direction, basically. You know what I'm saying? Because I can literally zoom out to a ship on the Atlantic Ocean that's 18 miles out in the shipping lane, and then zoom in with my camera, and I can still see the water meeting the ship's hull, so forth and so on. I can zoom in on the moon like no tomorrow, but it's 189,000 miles away. I don't know about that. What I am saying is I believe that the sun and the center of the sun, and the reason that they cover the sun up every single solitary day, is because the center of the sun is activating. I think their job, I think what they're doing at CERN is working. So this is the video of them launching this balloon to space for whatever reason. And there it goes. And there it goes. Balloons are going up. There you go. And there we go. There we go. And there you see it. Right directly there in the middle of the sun. Either that's a solar simulator or there's a portal opening in the center of the sun. This is their video, not mine. Don't you think if they didn't want us to see this, or if they weren't hinting at it, they wouldn't show it? Instead, they frame it perfectly. And look at that very, very flat horizon. There's no two ways about it. I mean, look at that. There's no curvature there at all. It's completely, totally flat. And then here comes the sun. And there's the item in the center going right by. And there it is again. I mean, come on. It has to be. Everybody's catching this anomaly on film, and it isn't the camera. Not at all. And ever since all this stuff occurred, half the time when you see the sun, there's that weird anomaly that I showed you earlier in it. That's not accurate. That's not correct. And look what happens look how small the sun gets when the balloon passes in front of it. Watch this. See it? See it right there? Watch. Son of a... Hold on. Here we go. Sorry about that. I'm not very technical. This is phenomenal footage, though. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. Look at that. Zero curvature. This is for a physicist. They're showing this to us on purpose. Just my opinion. There goes the sun again. 92,051 feet. At any rate, leave it in the comment section. Richie from Boston, I am out. Much like the air in that balloon. They're rubbing it in our faces, people. Believe your eyes. Don't believe NASA. NASA is nothing but lies. Let me remind you of one small thing real quick. This is one of the head scientists captured from Nazi Germany, Werner von Braun, who warned us of the final card, the alien deception, blah, blah, blah. That's his grave site marker. This is the guy that sent rockets to the moon, remember? Well, then there's Psalm 19. Now, what does Psalm 19 say? 19:1? The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Why would a guy that sent things to outer space choose that particular Bible verse to put on his grave?
First, I'm going to show you an experiment I did with the sun rays. That's very solid proof that the sun is, in fact, close and not very big. And then I'm going to refute Wikipedia's account of these crepuscular rays. They say that these rays are due to perspective, and that, in fact, they are, for all intents and purposes, parallel lines from a sun that's almost 1 million miles in diameter. But the fact that we see them splaying out, they say that that's due to perspective. I'm going to show that that's impossible. And then number 3, I'm going to show that it's actually, when you take a look at this picture of the crepuscular rays, that actually perspective is missing from this photo, if in fact the sun were 1 million miles in diameter and 93 million miles away. The heliocentric model is in trouble. So let's get to my experiment. I watched a video from my perspective. His video is called Flat Earth Sunbeams, Part 1. I was outside and I go, man, let me try that. And I just kind of ran in, I grabbed some cardboard, I cut some holes in it, and I wanted to see how the sun reacts coming through. So here I am, raising it high over my head. So I'm about 8 feet away from this, and the light doesn't diverge or spread out. You know, it doesn't splay out like we see the crepuscular rays. And this sun's far away. Just like in the heliocentric model, the sun is far away, right? 93 million miles away from our clouds. But we see the sun rays splaying out from the clouds as though it were a close sun and not a faraway sun. Well, you can see when it is far away, the light beams are parallel and they don't splay out or diverge from the clouds. So then I got a little bit more sophisticated. I went inside and I cut some nicer holes in another cardboard. You know, my budget went up. And here they are, and I put some CGI here. I put some beams in there, and you can see they are dead straight. No splaying out. And then you can also, there's a part here where I have it up overhead, and I had the same results. No splaying out. So this is the example of the faraway sun, that the rays, this is what we should experience coming through the clouds. The rays from a sun that's almost 1 million miles in diameter and 93 million miles away, when those rays get here, they should be parallel and dead straight. But we don't see them as dead straight. We see them splaying out or diverging from the clouds. Something's not right here. Okay, here I am inside. Notice I got my light close. Look at already you can see the light splaying out. You see that? I drew you can see the circles on the floor and on my piece of cardboard actually. Those are the original size of the holes that when I was outside they lined up perfectly. Here you can see them completely splaying out. And if I put the rays on it like this, the sun rays, and that's not even as splayed out as they got. It's just that the cloud is in view. And I want you to be able to see the cloud, which is my cardboard with the holes cut out of it. That way I could line up the rays. But as you can see, when I moved up a little bit off the floor and put the light even closer, the rays really splayed out. So I just wanted you to see that. Okay, so there you go. There's hard evidence that when the light source is close to the clouds, the light will diverge. The dispersion pattern you can see when I was outside, the dispersion pattern remained the same, meaning the 5 holes that I had like that stayed exactly the same, and that's a faraway light source. But when the light source was close, they splay out. That definitely supports the flat Earth model of a small, close sun. Okay, let's analyze this claim that science makes and Wikipedia makes that the crepuscular rays are due to perspective, that they're actually very close to parallel lines. For all intents and purposes, they are parallel, coming from a sun that's almost 1 million miles in diameter, but we don't see them parallel coming through the clouds. Those crepuscular rays are angled outward. They splay out. They're diverging from the clouds. And Wikipedia is saying that that's due to perspective. Okay, and Wikipedia also uses railroad tracks like these. And they say, see how these converge at your horizon, or they diverge from the perspective of the sun outward? And they're saying that that's what's going on here. Okay, so we need a quick little review of perspective. Notice in this long hallway, all parallel lines and planes angle to the eye level or the eye position of the observer. Notice that the side walls angle in, those are parallel lines to one another, and the ceiling and the floor are also parallel, but notice how they angle toward each other and they come to your eye level. All right, you have an X, Y, and Z axis. So the railroad tracks would fit your Z axis. That's going away from you, and those lines, yes, they converge. But the sun, and especially when the sun's overhead, would be bombarding us with huge vertical parallel lines, or rays, parallel rays. Yet we don't see any of that ever. So what I'm going to show you here is that this claim that these crepuscular rays is due to perspective is not true. It's impossible, because perspective will not converge or diverge or splay out lines or planes that are parallel to one another, that are perpendicular to the viewer or his Z-axis. Okay, so like in this picture of the railroad tracks here, the lines going away from you, that's I did with the green line, that's the railroad track, that's obvious. And right from the get-go, they start to converge. Now those are parallel lines, but yet we never see them as parallel. They're always converging as they go away from you. Now the black poles that I have going down the side of the railroad tracks are also parallel lines to one another. But notice that they stay parallel. They don't lose their parallel orientation. They may get shorter and they get smaller, that's true. They do have a sort of a convergence, but they don't change their parallel orientation, these vertical lines, because they're perpendicular to you. Now, this is why invoking perspective to explain the crepuscular rays doesn't work, because perspective does not splay out these vertical lines, yet whenever the sun is overhead, we should see vertical parallel rays everywhere, and yet we don't see them. So perspective as an explanation for this is invalid. You know, what we see is the rays emanating from this omnidirectional sun. The rays fit the size of the sun, and the angles of the rays off the sun also fit the size of the sun and the shape of the sun. But they shouldn't fit the size of the sun if the sun is in fact almost 1 million miles in diameter and 93 million miles away. The rays should be huge and the sun small. So that's telling us that the sun is in fact close. Okay, and let's go back to what Wikipedia said. Wikipedia says that the rays from the sun are in fact parallel lines, but we don't see them that way because of perspective. Perspective splays them out. Okay, look at this picture. I put these rays in. Okay, so this is what's really going on, Wikipedia says. They say the rays are really parallel, and they would be from a 1 million mile diameter sun. But this is what our eyes do through perspective. It splays it out. Okay, here's another one. They say this is how they really are, They're vertical and they're parallel, but our eyes splay them out like this. Okay, so then why doesn't perspective take these telephone poles and splay them out like this? We don't see that, do we? Why doesn't it take these buildings and splay them out like this? They're vertical and they're parallel. Well, because what we see, the crepuscular rays, is not due to perspective. It's just due to the nature of an omnidirectional light source with the light coming out in all directions. And it's coming from a small sun. It's impossible that this sun is 1,000,000 miles in diameter, as I've already showed you. So then if it's not perspective, these crepuscular rays are not due to perspective, as Wikipedia and science in general claims they are, then what are they? Well, it's very simple. All they are is radially propagated light. Or another way of saying it, light rays emanating out from a common center, like the sun, or any light. And I understand that the light rays coming off the sun looks like perspective. It shares the common trait where, with perspective, all the lines and planes converge at a point in the distance called your vanishing point. The sun also has that look, where looks like the rays all converge at a point in the center of the light. Actually, the light rays are emanating out from a common center, but I can understand how they look alike, but they're not the same. Okay, that's all it is. And so, as we've already proved, that perspective can't explain the crepuscular rays, because where are all the vertical parallel sun rays then? They don't exist. Okay, so next I'm going to show you with streetlights and sunlight and how they look exactly alike. Okay, let's take a look at some light rays. Let's look at how the sun and a street lamp look the same. The one on the left is a street light, and the one on the right is the sun. Okay, notice that the light source and the rays match one another. And with the street light, that light is here on Earth, right? It's right there on your street. And those rays look in proportion to that light. They're also here, right? On your street or wherever you see that light. The sun, they're telling us, is actually far away, but the light rays are close. Like when we see these crepuscular rays coming through the clouds. And did you know that streetlights also have crepuscular rays? Just like the sun does, and you know what? They look identical. Let's have a look. Here on the left, that's a street light, and those are crepuscular rays coming off of that street light, and they look identical. They are in the same proportion as our sun and its rays. And you can't say that that's perspective, because they're right there, and as we've seen, perspective can't explain those rays anyway. So those rays are nothing more than radially propagated light. In other words, it's light coming from a common center. That's all. And look at this one. The left one is a street light. The one on the right are the sun rays. They are both in proportion to one another. The light source matches its rays, which indicates that they're both local. Okay, and this street light is here. We know it's here. And we know those crepuscular rays are here. There's no fooling us and telling us it's 93 million miles away or 1,000,000 miles in diameter. And it looks just like the sun that they're telling us is far away and huge, and whose light rays are here, though, on the Earth. Same here. Same as what we see in the sky. The sun matches the sun rays. But in the heliocentric model, with a sun that's 93 million miles away and almost 1,000,000 miles in diameter, the rays should be completely out of proportion, like this. You know, we shouldn't maybe even see the sun. Maybe the sun should just be a blob of light on the other side of our lit up atmosphere from these huge rays. I mean, we see the sun like it's in our atmosphere, like it's close, but it can't be, according to the heliocentric model. And next, I want to show you how, in this photo, perspective is actually missing. And what's ironic is the very linear perspective that they tried to invoke to explain this photo is actually missing from this photo for the heliocentric model to be true. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, I mean they invoked perspective to describe or explain these crepuscular rays, the fact that they're splaying out from the clouds, because they had to invoke perspective or something, because this picture doesn't work for the heliocentric model. This picture of these crepuscular rays is a problem for their model because the sun is supposed to be 1,000,000 miles in diameter. But the problem is they've invoked perspective, but perspective doesn't work because, as I've already showed you, it doesn't explain the parallel vertical lines that we should see all over the place. Perspective will not splay those out, right? So these vertical rays should be everywhere, the parallel vertical rays, but we don't see them. The perspective that's missing is like the sun is out there and it's almost 1,000,000 miles in diameter, right? So its sunbeam, it shoots out a sunbeam, and that sunbeam is 100,000 miles wide, let's say. But what we see from here looks very small, right? But not when it gets here. When it gets here, it's going to be massive, okay? But yet, look at these sun rays coming through the clouds. They're small, they're skinny, they're tiny. They match the local sun that we see in the sky here. So that's what I mean by perspectives missing. And let me give you a couple of real-world examples to help you figure this out. Okay, now imagine you're at a football game, an American football game, and you can see the player, the quarterback, down on the field, and he's as big as a peanut, okay, on the field, even smaller. Okay, and the football is the size of a short grain of rice. And he's got this great arm, and he turns around and he throws that ball up to you in the stands, and he can throw it all the way to you. Now, I got a question for you. When the ball gets to you, is it going to be the size of a grain of rice, or is it going to be the size of a regulation football? Well, it's going to be the size of a regulation football, right? But that's not what we see in this picture with the sun rays. Those sun rays fit the size of the sun. And now let's take a look at this soccer player. All right, for those of you who don't know American football, there, he kicks it, he's far away, and the ball gets to you, it's going to be the size of a soccer ball, right? This is proper perspective. This is the perspective we're not seeing when we look at the sun. The sun that we see in the sky is close. Okay, here's a train leaving a station far away down the tracks. Also analogous to the rays leaving the 1,000,000-mile diameter sun. Okay, the rays would be massive just like the train is massive compared to that little train station. Right? That's proper perspective. Now look at these shafts of light coming from the sun, the rays. The sun on the right here, each of its rays that you see coming off the sun would be about 100,000 miles wide. Just like this. You could fit 10 Earths side by side in that ray. Okay, so when we look at these rays, they're not 100,000 miles wide, and they're diverging out from a small sun that we see in the sky. I mean, that proves right there the sun is close and small. Now, I know somebody's going to seize upon this and say, hey, wait a minute, but we don't see perspective with the sun traveling over the flat Earth. We should see it shrink to a dot and disappear. We don't see that. Well, I was going to save this for another video, and I maybe still will, but let me introduce to you celestial perspective. It's different than regular perspective that we're used to every day. Regular perspective, we see a train on the tracks, and as it goes away from you, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappears. But the sun, on the other hand, is different because the sun, when it's quote-unquote next to you, is high overhead and has already experienced a reduction in size. Now, as it goes away from you, it follows the convergence lines down to your horizon, essentially keeping it same distance from you. So the two movements offset each other. The one, the sun moving away from you, and then the visually lowering as it follows the convergence lines down to your eye level horizon. Also, the sun is too big to shrink to a dot anyway, right? It's going to go below the observer's horizon before that happens. Now note this about the convergence lines. Notice that on this wall of lines, the higher up they get, the more steep they get. They orient themselves away from the horizontal and more to the vertical. So the train on the tracks, as that goes away from you, it's right on your eye level. It's actually on your z-axis. Here's a picture of the z-axis, x-axis, and y-axis. It's on your z-axis, so all you can see is the train get smaller and smaller and smaller. You can't see any movement laterally or vertically out of that plane. But the sun is different because the sun, even though it's cruising over the Earth parallel to the ground, it's on a much higher plane. So when it's overhead, it's already had a visual reduction in size. So now when it goes away from you and it follows those convergence lines down, it'll appear to be the same size because the going away and the lowering kind of offset each other. And same as this train. If you put this train high up overhead, that will cause it to already have a visual reduction in size also. So now when it goes away from you, it too will maintain its size. Kind of like if you're flying a kite, right? And you have the kite and it's a mile overhead, well, it'll appear a certain size, right? But let's say it takes a nosedive, but the string stays taut, so it goes all the way to the ground. Now it's a mile further down the road from you, but it's still the same size visually, right? So that's kind of how this works too. So let's recap. In my experiment, I showed that when the sun is close, the rays splay out, but when the sun is far, the rays are straight parallel beams. Yet, this is what they show us, this picture of crepuscular rays, and say that that's a faraway sun. Then I showed you how perspective can't explain what we see because it doesn't splay out things like these poles or these buildings. And then I showed how the sun mimics perspective. It has the same look. The light rays radially propagate outward, or they radiate out from a common center. And that's what we're seeing with the sun. It's not perspective. And then I showed how the streetlights, the crepuscular streetlights, match the sun. The same crepuscular rays from the sun and from the streetlights, and they look identical. Both local light sources and local rays. Then I showed you celestial perspective, and that's different from regular perspective, like the train going down the tracks that's on your same plane as your eyes, and as that goes away, it can only shrink. It gets smaller and smaller. But the sun is high up overhead, so it's vertically already had a visual reduction in size. So as it goes down to your eye level horizon, it'll maintain its same size. Okay, and that wraps up celestial perspective, and that wraps up this presentation. I believe we made a strong case. A lot of evidence here, if not complete proof. And thank you so much for watching. There's only one thing left to do. Let's kick the ball out of here. Take care.
The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat. We take some illusion. The earth is flat, living in illusion. So people don't know what to do. The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat, staging illusion.
If you did like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you haven't subscribed, hit the red subscribe button. Also click on the little bell icon to get notifications of my flat earth videos, which I upload every day.